Welcome to the Inspiring Veterans Podcast with your host, Gary Rohmann. In each episode of the Inspiring Veterans Podcast, veterans coach Gary Rohmann invites veterans and professionals who support veterans to discuss the process of transitioning out of armed service into civilian society. The Inspiring Veterans Podcast aims to answer the question, what's next? You can find the show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, GaryRohmann.com. Now here's the host of the Inspiring Veterans Podcast, your host, Gary Rohmann.
Hello, everybody. Again, this is Gary Rohmann, the Veterans Coach, and I appreciate everyone joining me today. We have a really tremendous guest, Matthew Bartlett. And Matthew and I have known each other for about 2 years. And I was very fortunate to be his coach when he was part of the Honors Foundation. Matthew has a tremendous background, but I'm going to let him tell you about that. So Matthew, if you would, tell us a little bit about your veteran career or your military career and the things. I know you've been in it a while, but just kind of give us a good idea of what you've done in the military.
All right. Absolutely. And first and foremost, I want to thank you for having me on and allowing me the opportunity to participate in the podcast, and hopefully that some insight that I give in my military career and the transition that I'm going through from military to civilian world will help others kind of figure out how to transition hopefully smoothly. So we'll see. So grew up in North Carolina. I enlisted in July of 2004. So this year will mark my 20-year mark, and I'll be retiring September 30th of this year. Joined the Navy because, quite frankly, I wasn't great in school. I had joined the JROTC in my high school, and figured that was going to be the route that I took. Hopefully to kind of mature, take advantage of the travel to, seek some of the benefits, everything like that. At the time, I didn't really know as much about the benefits as, the junior personnel joining today do, right? So I joined, went to, Great Lakes, did the boot camp scene. And then I went to Pensacola, Florida, where I went through the aircrew and rescue swimmer pipeline to ultimately be a helicopter rescue swimmer turned crew chief throughout my entire career. Then I came up to California. I went through HS-10, which was the helicopter anti-submarine squadron, fleet replacement squadron. That's where the instructors from fleet experience train junior personnel how to operate in the back of the aircraft. And then once you get that initial qualification, you'll go to your first sea duty. So my first sea duty was at Helicopter Sea Combat or Helicopter Anti-Submarine Squadron 14 out in Japan. I was out there for 5 years, and then came back to San Diego, where I went through the Seahawk Weapons Training and Tactics Instructor course, and was a level 5 WTI evaluating and instructing tactics in the back of the H-60 aircraft, the Foxtrot, Hotel, and the Sierra. And then after my stint there at the weapons school, I took a sidestep from the helicopter community for a couple of years, and I flew unmanned aircraft systems with the West Coast SEAL teams over at Special Reconnaissance Team 1. Got to really broaden my resume, get to broaden the experience, and then I brought some of those lessons learned back to the fleet. And I'm currently an instructor at the Fleet Replacement Schoolhouse, where we train that initial session for junior personnel on how to fly in the aircraft, and then so they can go out to the fleet and do the job.
Well, you've had it sounds like a very progressive career. I mean, and also a very productive career. So tell me again, why did you initially join the Navy?
Oh, full transparency. I was not very good in school. I didn't have great grades, and I wasn't mature enough to go out to college, live on my own without, making bad decisions and all that. So I just figured that, and actually, to be honest, I joined the military because I wanted to get away from school, and I was like, I'm not going to go to college right away. And a little did I know that the first couple of years of the Navy would be school, so just kind of a little counter intuitive in that aspect. But honestly, it's probably the best thing for me as far as the maturity level is concerned. My the my ability to learn, the education that it provided for me. So yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, that really resonates with a high percentage of those in the military. When they join the military, they still trying to figure out themselves, and as you said, maturity levels. So your story in that regard echoes with a number of veterans I've talked to over a period of time. So appreciate you being transparent about that. So as you were in the military, was it smooth sailing, or did you have challenges along the way that you were able to overcome?
No, I definitely had challenges along the way. When I talk about that maturity level, I made a couple mistakes that kind of set me back in my career. But if it weren't for the relationships, and if it weren't for the people that they saw something in me, that they took a chance on me, and gave me another opportunity to prove that I can bounce back from these mistakes, that the mistakes didn't define me, and I'd be able to bounce back stronger and be better post mistake. I wouldn't have made it as far as I did in my career. So honestly, like, the utmost gratitude goes to those who actually supported me along the way and really were who I leaned on and who I owed to get out of those circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate you sharing that as well. You and I have a relationship. As I mentioned earlier, I was very fortunate to be your coach at the Honor Foundation. We may talk about that later. But I'm also, outside of that, I've been an instructor through the Department of Labor, doing transition workshops. And so over the last 8 years, I have had the fortune of having over 3,000 veterans in my class. So I've seen a lot and heard a lot. And the reason I say that, it's interesting to note that 45% of veterans leave their first job in the first year. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, these are veterans of all backgrounds. This was a study that was done in 2017 by Hire Heroes and Chamber of Commerce, and they monitored 2,500 veterans from all backgrounds, ranks, services. It was a good mix. And they monitored these veterans for 1 year. All the veterans had a job, full-time job, at the time of separation. And 45% left that job in the first year. The other thing is, it's documented that 70% of veterans indicate that transition was harder than they expected. So tell me, I know you're in the midst of that right now. How's your transition going?
So far, so good. And like you said, we'll more than likely talk about the Honor Foundation, and really what kind of opened the door for the networking and getting to know people who are within different organizations of interest, reaching out to other veterans who went through the transition, and really just understanding that this is not something that's uncommon, and that there are a lot of people who went through the heartache of the transition process and everything, and just reaching out to them. And like, what's a recurring theme is take a deep breath. Everything's going to be okay. And it took me it took me up until about my year out mark to really kind of allow that to sink in. Right. So I think because there's such a, I do have if I wanted to re-enlist, I could. And so that opportunity is there. And I'm in this like, well, do I re-enlist for that job security, or do I venture out and, hey, close this chapter of my life and then open up a new chapter. And once I got to that point of like that year out where it's like, okay, this is happening. We're going to transition into the civilian sector. You start reframing your mind around these things and what's translatable to what you want to do and kind of what's out there. And I think for the most part, one of the scarier things is that when you've done a job for such a long time, and the process for military members is, we have, it's not uncommon to know what your next tour of duty is going to be at that 12-year mark. So you can like, okay, hey, I got orders to the East Coast, or I got orders to wherever the case is. And so you have time to kind of prepare for that. But that's not how the civilian world works. I can't apply for a job now and have a guaranteed job in a year. And it's like, hey, maybe hit us up a little bit closer to the time. Maybe you'll have a job, maybe you won't. I think that's something that kind of translate a little bit differently to like what the expectations are moving forward. But really, I've been able to kind of focus on and the other aspect of sorry from kind of all over the place, but when you think about what kind of jobs you're going to do post-military, it's not uncommon for and for me, a lot of people that I've talked to that are transitioning to try to do something similar to what they've been doing in the military, because it's what you've done, it's what you know. But when you start to kind of look into like what other things you bring to the table and what other marketable value you have, and like those skill sets that you basically learned through experience, it actually broadens the scope of what you can do post-military.
Yeah, exactly. So tell me again, when's your official separation date?
September 30th of this year.
Of this year, okay. So, one of the things we went through, the process that we went through was, as you talked about, kind of come to grips with who you are and the skills you have. We went through the why process, correct? And the process was designed to help you reflect on your past in order to maybe see, as a result of that reflection, you could connect the dots to where you want to go after the military. I think, and tell me if this is true or not, but I think so many veterans, when they face transition, your life is consumed with the military. You have assignments, you have orders, you have things you got to continue to do, and in the military, quite honestly, unfortunately, is your number one priority, just about, and by no choice of your own, but that's your full mission. And so when it comes to within the year of separation, it's hard to kind of step back, you might say, and really reflect, because you don't have a lot of time to do that. So, and what I'm trying to say is, and this, being involved in special forces, that, like, let's say you're out in the wilderness forest somewhere, and you got a compass, and so you want to get to your destination, but the first thing you have to do is you got to know where you're at, right? And then use those coordinates in your compass to get you to where you want to go. And that's kind of what I'm trying to compare to the transition process. You got to reflect, see where you're at, and then after the reflection and the process in of itself will give you an idea of where you want to go. Is that true for you?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think the longer you're in the military and the higher you get in the rank structure, like, you develop an identity based on your role within that rank and everything. And I think one of the more humbling experiences, especially with like the honor foundations, is you meet very high ranking individuals, lieutenant commanders, captains, people on the enlisted side, chiefs, all the way to master chiefs. That's what their identity. That's what their identity's been. They've been like this rank, or it's like, people know me as captain, people know me as commander, and with that, there's like a unwritten understanding of what that is, because you're in the military. You know what I mean? once you transition out, like that was, again, that's just a part of your life. If I get a job in the civilian sector, no one's, unless you have some sort of affiliation with the military, if I'm a chief, that unless I can spit it out into what civilian terms is as a chief, that whole understanding of what my role is non-existent, so it's, you do kind of like lose that identity of something that's been a part of you, what you've become over so many years. I think that's one of the harder things that people understand. So and I've talked to many individuals who were heavily invested in their role and their job in the military, and when they get on, they're like, oh, people don't respect me as this XYZ, so on and so forth. It's like, they don't understand what that is. Like they don't know how to correlate that. If you say, hey, I was as a commander, that's the equivalent of like a CEO, yeah, maybe, and they'll be able to understand and put that into context. But other than that, I think that's probably one of the harder things to kind of grasp is how do you broadcast what you've done to an organization or to a group of people that don't know anything about it, and it's really just kind of hard to do. I know I'm not making sense here, but it's hard for me to be like, but I'm this. And if I say military, people are like, okay, cool, got it, boom, that's what you are. We understand based on range structure, but like in the civilian world, and it's okay. And like, okay.
I think that's the biggest challenge. I mean, is being able, when you're asked the question, tell me about yourself, and you got about maybe 2-3 minutes to answer that question in an interview, and you're taking 20 plus years experience doing a lot of things, and you got to nail it within, like I said, 3 minutes. That's a big challenge, and it's not easily done unless you really think it through. And you've been fortunate, I believe, to be surrounded with other veterans that are getting out, and the support of the foundation to help you really navigate that. And I've seen you at work, and I feel like you really have done a good job in that process. So what, at the present time, what type of career are you looking for?
So it's interesting that you should mention that. I didn't realize that my interest in I've been an instructor in the Navy for over 15 years, and I really enjoy teaching. I really enjoy training development. I love the autonomy to be able to tailor what's relevant, what's important to real-time situations, and getting people up to speed as quickly as they can to be the best performers that they can be at any given time. And so that training development side of the house is where I've taken interest. But over the last couple of years, I went to school and got my degree in general studies, but the concentration on communication and leadership, and all those tools that you see in the university courses and everything like that of leadership translates very well to the military. So then I adapted those, started doing the leadership development courses in the military, and so that organizational leadership and training development is really what I'm aiming for. And I didn't realize up until a couple months ago that actually falls under the human resources realm of organizations, and I never. And this is me being completely naive about the civilian sector, that human resources. I just never thought that would be something that I would potentially find myself working with or in, but that realm.
Yeah, I was looking at your resume, and as I said earlier, you have a wealth of experience on so many different areas. I mean, you could have gone into work for some companies that have government contracts, for example, or military contracts because of your expertise in special forces, and while you've got experience in aviation, drones as well. So, I mean, that was some other potential things, but I like the fact that since I know you better than most, I think that would be a good fit for you. You are a good facilitator. You are good at training and communicating with other people, and I think it'd be a great fit for you.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So, as one of the things you got, let's see, September, you got about what, 6 months or so before get your DD 214. At the present time, what are you focusing on in regards? I'm going to distribute this podcast to many places I can, and hopefully there will be people that will get to know you through the podcast. But what are you looking for specifically, or the type of organization you're looking for? Could you give any flavor or color on that?
I think that's a great question, because ideally, like we mentioned, some of the harder things about transition is that military to civilian speak. So if ideally I'd like to go like towards an organization that has a decent veteran presence, so I can kind of segue a little bit easier, and not as much energy and effort into translating what I've done on the military side into the civilian world. It doesn't take that as much energy and effort, because there's a lot of veteran presence and everything, and it really kind of help with that. I think being in an organization where it's customer based, help working with people, at the same time connecting the business aspect of it as well, to be like, hey, we need to, while we are interested in, pushing this, whatever product, whatever the case is, to a vast, populace of, companies, whatever the case is, there is also that, like, what's in it for me, and correlating that to be like, hey, this is not only is this something that you would need, but we as an organization can train you up to speed, get you where you need to be, so you can employ said product or utilize said product to the best of its capability. And so to answer your question, that can be anywhere from the training development on learning management systems to actual field training sites where we're having that relationship and that customer engagement, and I can relay all the issues, all the heartaches, all the positives, all the negatives back to the company, and we can kind of get to the yes. We can kind of figure out what works best for both parties.
That was good information here, and the reason yesterday actually I was on a podcast. Somebody was interviewing me, and they asked me, what can employers do for veterans? And there's several things that I mentioned, and again, you touched on a couple of them. Number one, I recommended that employers become more skill-based on their hiring process versus maybe based on experience. I think companies also, your mission, all veterans all veterans pretty much, your mission has been to protect our country. That was your mission. And you were clear on that mission. You knew that from day one. And all veterans basically do. But now you got to define your mission. The mission is you got to define your mission, a new mission. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's one thing that corporate America could do, is provide mentorship for veterans as part of the onboarding process, so that they can walk side by side for a period of time with the veterans that they hire, and to give them insights into how to adjust or things they need to maybe think about as they acclimate to a different environment and a different mission. Another thing I believe is important is, and again, this would take a little bit of time to explain, but helping provide insight into mental health. And the reason I say that, look what we went through 2019 with COVID.
Mhm.
And that was a big area where companies dropped the ball. And they didn't know, they were not providing as much support with healthcare, mental health care, as they should have, because employees were lost. They had to work, they had to stay home for a period of time. They've had to learn how to work from home remotely. And many people felt that the corporations just didn't care for them, because here they were out by themselves and nobody around them to help them navigate these tough times. You yourself have been in a lot of chaotic environments, right? In many environments that were high risk. You had to get the job done and overcome so many obstacles. And so I think, again, I like where you're going with your career right now, because you know how to navigate those challenges, and you would provide a tremendous amount of insight to leadership of a company, how to navigate those things. Does that resonate?
It absolutely does. And I think, and to that point, I think COVID really kind of unveiled the need for in-person employment, right? So, where a lot of organizations were like, hey, we need to be face-to-face. I need to be able to see that you're working. I need to see that you're doing this. Well, when COVID hit and more people were working from home and they were getting the same amount of work done, if not more, I think that companies kind of found like, oh man, how do we kind of keep, they trying to maintain that like so-called leash on employees, where it's like, oh, if they're not in the office, I can't monitor that they're actually working, but the job's still getting done. And so I think that it really reframed where it's like, if the job's getting done and it's done within a deadline, everything like that, are you just as productive in an 8-hour span in the office, or can you be more productive in the 2-3 hour span at home, focusing on this stuff, and then boom, you got all stuff. So I think that there's like I really think it unveiled a lot of like, hey, this is how the organization runs. So when it looks like companies or organizations didn't care about the individual, I think it was just, this kind of marked a new day and age where it's that whole, even though I'm present in the office, that doesn't mean I'm as productive as if I were at home and I could concentrate and doing all these things. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that I've been more productive when I've been at home, and I've gotten 2 to 3 dedicated hours where I'm just, crunching up reports, doing whatever the case is, and then the rest of the day is done. Where it's like at work, I'm like, oh, I have to be here until 4 o'clock anyway. I kick this can a little bit down the road, and like, get on the computer, do all that stuff. Like, it's just that presence doesn't equal production.
Yeah,
makes sense. So, and I think that that's just a lot of things that this day and age, and where we're at in society, just needs to kind of adapt to, and what the expectations are for employees. Because again, like, simply because you're there in person in the office doesn't mean you're going to be more productive than if you're working remotely and meeting the same deadlines.
And directly related to that is leadership. Being leaders, setting. You got to, in the military, the culture goes with the leader, pretty much, right? Because you're in all kinds of situations, working at all the different places. Sometimes you're working with people you can't see, but you can talk to. And so as a leader, you've got to, in essence, take the culture with you and live it and set the example day in and day out. I've seen that to be so true so many times.
Absolutely.
So as we come to the end, it's amazing how fast our time has gone. What recommendations would you make to a veteran that's listening to this podcast if they're in the midst of transition? What would be maybe your top 3 recommendations?
My main recommendation, this is something that I've learned over the last couple of months, is there are a lot of processes that we do in the military that actually help with that you'll see in the civilian sector. So, for example, there are different awards that that we can give our junior personnel. So in the Navy, we can give Sail of the Quarter awards, and in that is a Sail of the Quarter package, and we write up basically. There's a rubric that we write to and make sure we encapsulate everything that individual has done. This in and of itself is the resume portion of transition. So once you get that resume, and that resume is tailored to job duties, responsibilities, and roles and everything like that, then you've got that administrative portion down. Then once it clears, once it goes up to a board, and that member is now presenting to the board, and people get eyes on the appearance, the mannerisms, the military bearing, ask them more questions about Navy heritage, more what are some new nav admins that have come out, so on and so forth. That's the interview process, and then it's the equivalent. It's basically exactly what you're doing. It's just being reframed in another way, and then later on, if you end up winning, you get called to command quarters and you get the award. If you nail the interview, you get the phone call that you potentially have a job and or the offer, everything like that. So there are certain, if you frame what you do in the service as really good segues into the civilian sector, that's one way of kind of helping, like, hey, these are all things that you've done. It might seem foreign, but, and again, I'm saying this as somebody who didn't realize this until 19 years and 8 months into the military, where it's like, oh, these processes are exactly the same. But I mean, they're basically like they align really well. The next thing I would say to transitioning service members are, look at all the skills that you've obtained up to this point, right? So crisis management, problem solving, communication, all of these skills are, these are things that are going to help you in an organization or with, higher ups and everything like that. So even if the job that you do in the service, your MOS, your NEC, whatever it might be, you've earned doing those things, translate and really kind of capitalize on that and how you've applied said skills. And then the last thing is evaluations, right? So, what the Navy does in particular, I can't speak for all the services, but what the Navy does in particular is that quantifiable data that is truncated into the annual evaluation. It's huge for resumes. I mean, it's like, hey, what'd you do? How did you employ it, and what was the outcome? You know what I mean? So it's like boom, boom, boom. And if you capture all that in the evaluation, you easily translate that over to the resume. So I would just say that, like, look at the things that you do currently that you maybe not think, that you might not invest so much time in interview thinking that this is like, these are transferable skills, but they absolutely are. And so that would be some advice that I would have transition for service members.
Exactly. I mean, I see a lot of resumes. One of the things that I note is, they have broad statements rather than quantifiable statements, which really gets the attention of the interviewer or the company reading your resume. So that's a tremendous insight. Matthew, tell me, how can people that are watching this video get in touch with you? What is the best way? Whether, is it your email, or how would you describe the best way to get in touch with you?
If anybody wants to reach out and, they found anything that I said enlightening, or they want me to kind of elaborate on it, I'll be more than happy to have a conversation. But reach out to me via LinkedIn. Matthew Bartlett, and I've got at this point, I've got a lot of connections that, especially on the military side. So LinkedIn would probably be the best way. And then through my LinkedIn, email, and then phone number at that point.
Well, Matthew, I want to say a big thanks to you for your willingness to spend some time with me. I count you as a close friend, and I haven't talked to you in a few months, but it was so good to catch up with you. And for those veterans out there, please remember, you don't have to travel alone. I think one of the important things as you in the transition process, your community is going to change. The people you're connected with in the military, that's going to change. And I believe it's very important to start making those connections with people outside the military. So you have people that you get advice from, insights you can call upon as you navigate transition. And again, Matthew, thank you for your time today. I wish you the very best. And thank you for everyone for taking advantage of looking at my podcast. All the best to everybody.
All right. Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
You've been tuning into the Inspiring Veterans Podcast with your host, Gary Rohmann. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, GaryRohmann.com. Thank you for your positive reviews, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.